Thank you very much. I have a quick quiz for you. Question 1. You have 2 children in a classroom. One of them is quiet, but academically bright. The other one is noisy, but he's not doing very well with his lessons. Which of them do you think is going to drop out of school? Question 2. A child is living in a rural area, the other one in urban setting. Which one of them is more likely to drop out of school? Question 3. Are the poorest and most vulnerable children more likely to benefit from a program that aims to prevent their dropping out of school? So think about these 3 questions, and I believe they are worth thinking. So what keeps a child in school and what influences them to continue education is actually a very complicated thing. And that is why, as part of Choose School project, World Vision Romania partnered with Babeș-Bolyai University to actually do a research that studies the factors that lead children to stay in school and prevents them from dropping out. Okay, first, let's establish why we want children to be in school. Of course, we want the most vulnerable children and the poorest one to be able to escape this trap of poverty that is intergenerational. Because education is linked to the most important development goals that we want for ourselves. It improves the child's confidence, it improves the economic prospects, it improves the health, and it prevents the spread of disease. It is not only good for the child, it's good for the community, and it's good for the society at large. So, it is not only a need for the society, but is a fundamental right of the children, of all the children. Because otherwise, the child's life is harder, not only as a child, but it makes it harder later in life for his future. Okay, so we agree that education is good for every child, but for the children who are the poorest or part of the vulnerable groups, this is harder to achieve. You have to make sure that the child has a chance to go to a good school. But more than that, you have to do everything necessary to keep them in school. And first things we found in our research is that keeping a child in school is actually a very complicated thing. There are a large number of factors that are actually influencing a child dropping out of school. First are reasons that have to do with their family or with their community and with the society at large, that all can have an influence on the child. So where do you start? In Romania, where we pioneered this project, we realized that we need a partner, and not just any partner. We needed somebody who had the influence and the ability to reach into as many of the poorest communities as possible. And luckily, we had the right partner in the Romanian Orthodox Church. They have a presence basically in every community. They have huge influence, and we share the same values. So our partnership was already in place since 2006 when we started together the first youth Bible curricula that helped the church organize its first Sunday schools in Romania. So let me tell you a little bit about the context of Romania. Since 2010, in Romania, the school dropout is on the rise. Everybody agrees that education is a critical element for the entire country's development. A lot of work had to be done to look at what is the situation. And the picture that we revealed had to do with poor educated parents that weren't able to understand what is the value added of the education for their children. We found poorly educated workforce who is actually going west to find jobs. And we found people who were being trafficked for their labor. In from communities where criminality was increasing and there was little understanding of the importance of the democratic processes. So pretty much some fairly fundamental problems. Our goal in our partnership, in this partnership with the Romanian Orthodox Church, was to develop a mechanism that would prevent children from dropping out of school and staying in education. We started in 2009, and our program, funded by the European Social Fund, was a 6 million program that ended up reaching 32,000 children and over 2,000 parents in over 3,000 parishes. That's impressive. And not only that, but critically, we were able to involve over 3,000 priests and teachers who have become part of this program. The children who took part in the program were selected with the support of the priests in their communities based on their level of vulnerability. So these were the children who were the most at risk of dropping out of school. We carried out an initial assessment when they entered the program to identify some of their attitudes towards school, some of their attitude towards themselves, in order to be able to profile each of the participants in the project. After they've been through this program, we assessed them again. And we wanted to see what kinds of changes have taken place for these children and how can we make it more effective for the children. It allowed us to refine the program. And as part of this assessment, we were able to build a picture of the children taking part, including their ethnicity, their parents' income, whether or not they had one or both parents working abroad. Majority of the children were coming from urban settings. We had a little over 50% of the children coming from urban settings and under 50% from rural settings. We also had 10% of the children Roma. And we made sure to include children who came from families whose income was under 250 euros per month. It's interesting to note that more than a third of these children had one or both parents working abroad. But on the practical aspects of the program, we developed a set of tools for the priests and for the teachers. And with these tools, we helped the priests setting up Sunday schools. During the Sunday schools, the priests were trained how to look for those talented children, for those children who had a special ability, and how they can build that special ability for the child. It became obvious that we needed to work on building the child's motivation to be integrated with their schools, with their peers. We did this using a value-based approach, discussing children's Christian values in the Sunday schools and in the youth groups, and developing their skills and abilities. For example, we ran summer camps. In the summer camps, the children were able to work with special instructors who helped them further develop their God-given abilities. Here's an example of what was achieved as a result of this program. At 16, Romeo already had a criminal record. He had abandoned school at 12 when he joined a criminal chain that was using children for theft somewhere outside of the country in the West. Romeo was becoming a father that summer. And although he was not an Orthodox child, he was identified by the priest in his community as being vulnerable and at risk of actually ending up in prison. At the end of the summer camp, Romeo said, "I have learned here that my life doesn't have to be like this, in fear, stealing, and risking my life and my freedom every day. I learned handcrafts. And I know now that I can do something beautiful with my hands and can be a breadwinner for my child. Before this summer camp, nobody gave me anything for free. Before the summer camp, nobody made me feel valuable. So as you can see, that this kind of work over time is breaking the vicious cycle and allows a virtuous cycle where children and young people are given a sense of worth, a self-worth, where they can develop their abilities and helps them feel like they belong into their group of peers. They belong to their community. This reinforces their commitment to attend. It helps them achieve. It helps them feel like part of their school group again. So going back to the quiz, Choose School demonstrated that the child with stronger connections is more likely to finish school than the child who is academically brighter. It showed that the most vulnerable children actually benefit the most from a program that aims to keep them in school. And it also shows that although children in rural areas are more likely to drop out of school, if you have a partner who has continuous presence and influence, like the church in our case, that can break the cycle of exclusion. It can provide children with a new sense of self-worth and a new sense of avoiding risks of dropping out of school. But nothing that's worth having, it's easy. So we had to work really hard at the beginning of this program to win the trust, first of all, to win the trust of the church, to win the trust of the individual clergy and the teachers who worked with us, and eventually to win the trust of the children and to keep our promise to them. This is an approach that is focusing on the individual child, and it's time-consuming. You need to have trained people to spend time with the children, to bring out the best of them. You need to build their confidence. And once you're doing that, their integration into school is actually very robust. So what did we learn? We learned that you can be more successful at keeping children in school by working with them and their families, and not just with the schools. We learned that in Romania, the church was an ideal partner. It is highly respected and influential. It has a presence even in the smallest community. It has been a unique partner in terms of outreach to the most vulnerable children. The model will have to be tested and adapted to see how it works with a different partner. But most of all, what we learned was that the project, Choose School project, had a statistically significant positive effect on the participants' attitude towards their education. Items analyzed show that the intervention produces changes with positive, desirable effects in all of the variables investigated. Statistically significant. That means that we know with absolute confidence, because the research shows that this was not a random change. Influencing children's attitude towards school, such as their perception of its usefulness, their motivation for it, or the relevance for their future, increases their self-confidence and their association of it with a sense of security. This is what brings the change. This approach does prevent them from dropping out. Moreover, the magnitude of the change was consistently high from a research point of view, standpoint, for all the children with very few exceptions. And what is the most amazing is that while it was high for all the children, the results were even greater for the children with the biggest problems, the most vulnerable, the children from the Roma community, the children who are the most likely to drop out of school. And this is good news for World Vision. because we are focusing on the most vulnerable children. I believe very strongly that we have here a model that can radically affect the children's attitude towards school and keep them learning where before they would have dropped out of school. We have seen changing in attitudes in all the areas that we wanted. And we have seen children delighted and happy in an environment that previously was frightening and cold. And that's why I commend Choose School as a model for change. If you want to know more about Choose School or any of the other evidence for change work that World Vision is doing, here's a website for you, www.evidenceforchange.org. Thank you.